Audiences are fragmented, and we hear that term a lot, but what does it actually mean? We're not working nearly as hard as other sectors are. Sport are far more entertaining than we are right now. We are the entertainment industry, but we've forgotten how to entertain people. You can no longer just have one trailer, and I'll tell you why.
Natalie Lynch. You are the founder and head of Cinch Media, which is a new kind of promotions company all about working with creatives, finding audiences in the new and digital era, particularly in the world of film and television, which I love. I want to get into that real detail of building audiences in this new era, but let's start first with the big picture. A lot has changed in our industry over the last, I'm going to say 5 years, but I think even if you say 2 years, it's a lot. What changes are you seeing and how is that impacting how we reach audiences?
I think the biggest change is fragmentation in audiences. We hear that term a lot, but what it actually means is that our audience once, where we knew they were watching television and they were streaming, they're now consuming media, all different types of apps, and they're spending more time on those apps than they are watching television. So I think it's really important to understand that when we're looking at audiences, they're not just in the one place anymore. 10 years ago, you were guaranteed an audience, and now there is no guarantee. You have to build it. You actually have to actively go out in front of your audience.
One of the things I found so interesting about this change is that we're not consuming more entertainment. It's just in different places. So that means that the shape of the pie is changing and the hours aren't growing, which is a big challenge. What do you think the television and film industry really isn't getting about audiences at the moment?
The funny thing is, when it comes to audiences, we're always talking about the audience in development and in production. How many producers' cuts have you been in? And you're critiquing every single second of a series because you want the audience to go on the journey with you. Everything we do is very audience-centric. However, it then just stops, and we're not thinking about the audience on the other end. We're not thinking about what we wanted to express in the show to our audience to convince them to watch it. And I think that's a really big issue at the moment, is we're not communicating with the audience, we're not building communities, and we're just not building enough awareness around our series and our films.
So if these are the changes and those are the challenges, what is the approach you're seeing that is being effective and that you're working with producers to address?
We're living in a digital era. And so if you're a production company and you don't have digital channels, you won't survive. And that's really the harsh reality, is that you have to have digital channels because we know that's where the audience are. We know people are spending more time watching video content on their phone, on social media and on YouTube, and we're just not there. And so when you look at other sectors, they're putting so much into building communities and they're putting so much emphasis on talking to and creating content to their audience and to their consumers. We're not doing that. And I think it's a hangover from back in the day when the only way you could get in front of your audience was via a network. We had no other way of talking to our audience, but that's changed. We can now be in the palm of our audience's hand, in their lounge room, talking to them and saying, hey, come watch our show. And I'll tell you why. This is who we are. This is where you can watch it. And we need to make it easy for them because all of a sudden, our platforms where we make a lot of our content, they're not easy to get to. And people are not spending a lot of time on those platforms. So you need to direct them to where your series is. And it's hard. And it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so that's why I'm really encouraging people to start now, because we're a decade behind. We're so far behind other sectors and we're so far behind when it comes to YouTube. Teachers, accountants, people working 9-to-5 jobs, they started YouTube channels and they've taken our audience. So the audience that we had, they've taken them.
So now, are you suggesting that individual producers need to do those, or we need to do it as an industry, or both?
I think if you're a production company and you don't have a YouTube channel, you're going to find it incredibly difficult to survive in the future. Our product is content. We make content. One of the biggest challenges for every other industry is how can they get enough content? Like they have to make it on top of everything else they're doing. So if you're a production company, it's likely you already have a lot of content that you could put on YouTube. You need a digital strategy because you need to understand what's the goal. Like, why are we on YouTube? The reason you're on YouTube is because that's where your audience are, likely. And that's where your audience are going to end up eventually. Who do you want to be? What are the stories you want to tell? And it's really about a couple of things. Entertaining, because let's not forget we are the entertainment industry, but we've forgotten how to entertain people. You want content that's going to entertain your audience. You want your own audience, you as a production company or a producer. That's really important now, to have your own audience. It's not the network's audience. It's not the streamer's audience. You need your own audience. And the benefit to that is you can collect data, and that's something that producers, we just don't have access to. You can build awareness over your projects and any future projects. You can have a two-way conversation with your audience. What do you like? What do you want to watch? You can then gather that information and feed it back into development. And lastly, you can monetize it. So these are the reasons why we need to be on YouTube, but you need to entertain and you need to have a clear strategy of what you're putting up on YouTube.
So much brilliant stuff in there. It just reminded me of one of your favourite quotes, which is, without an audience, there is no industry, which is really the core of what you're saying. Networks are not going to like that approach of a production company or producer building their audiences. Any thoughts on how that can be navigated, or is it just inevitable that they're going to have to accept that that's part of the future?
You can benefit from this hugely. And I've done a lot of research in other sectors looking at this exact kind of format. And what the networks don't understand is if a production company have their own audience, it's easier to convince them to go over to the platform or the network to view because you've got that channel of awareness. Secondly, if a production company is making money from online content, they can feed that back in development. That means you've got better developed series that can go into production. We know that in this industry, development is underfunded. So they set to benefit from developed series. Also, if the industry is making money, then they benefit as well because we don't have to go to every single agency to beg for funding and try and just collect all of our pennies. If a production company is making enough money to be able to go into production and they do team up with a network, that benefits everyone. So there's a lot of benefits for the network. If you're a network that don't have any funds for marketing, then you've got this production company that have a huge audience that you just go, oh, well, you guys do the marketing. You roll it out through your own channels. And so I think the networks, unfortunately, still thinking the way they did 10 years ago. And the biggest problem is that networks have never been audience-centric, and that is their biggest downfall. They've never had the audience's best interest in mind. And I listened to a really interesting interview with, I think he's the head of Chief of Innovation at YouTube. And he said something that really stopped me in my tracks. And he said, at YouTube, we value the creators so hugely because they make up a huge part of the YouTube ecosystem. So we pay them fairly and we support them. Now, I've never felt that working with a network. I've never felt that they have really seen the value in what production companies bring, because you have to beg, essentially. Trying to get a production up for a network can be really difficult. And I think we see decisions made in programming that absolutely do not have the audience's best interests at heart. And as a producer, that's really frustrating. And we don't see a lot of connection with audiences from networks either. So although networks are going to push back, absolutely, we have to remember that they are a dying breed, unfortunately. And if our industry is to flourish, the future is digital.
Let's talk about what a digital strategy actually is. When you say that, I have in mind it's some kind of business plan. Is that what it is? Something you think through, you plan out, and then you execute? Or is it more organic than that?
It's like a mixture between a business plan and a creative plan. So it's if you had an accountant and an artist come together. That's what a digital strategy is. So ultimately, it looks at what your goal is, and it pays to be clear on your goals. And it's also looking at, what does success mean now for our industry? What does success mean for the series and the films that we're launching? Is it monetary? Is it return on investment? Is it social sentiment and audience interaction? It's really important to be clear on what your goals are. So then you go back to the start and you look at what platforms are your audience on, and you use statistics to see. And I think a lot of producers would be staggered to see the difference between hours spent on YouTube versus hours spent on streaming. So when you look at the amount of subscribers Stan, Binge, Netflix and Disney have in Australia, YouTube far surpasses that. So there's 20.8 million active YouTube subscribers in Australia. And if you're a producer or a production company and you're putting all your eggs in the network streamer basket, that is a very small basket.
And one of the things about YouTube is it's a popular search engine as well. So in terms of discoverability, you need to have a footprint on there. You've been working with producers on doing audience analysis at a very early stage. What does that involve and what benefits can it bring to the production's ultimate success to have done that work early?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of producers come to me often when they've been turned down from funding bodies, but some others come to me because they're like, we've got this idea and we love the story and we think it's going to be amazing, but we don't really know if there's an audience for it. And, that does happen. You might have an amazing story, but then you look into it and you're like, no one cares. So what I typically do is I call it the workings out. It's like on a maths test. Sometimes you can get points for your workings out. And you can go through a process of, what are the themes of this story? What's the tone of the story? What's similar? And then I talk to the creators about how they see it. How do you see this project? Sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they're like, it's a little bit of this mixed with a little bit of this, but we're open. And then I do this huge deep dive into what the topic is. And it's amazing what you find. I'll go on Reddit, I'll go on TikTok, I'll go on YouTube. And there was one particular story that I started researching and looking at the themes. And I just found all these videos that were related to that topic that had 20 million views. The appetite for that type of story was huge. And so straight away, you're like, there is an appetite for this. And you give relevant examples. And then you're like, okay, what does that mean for the audience? Who is looking at these videos and who's engaging with it? And then you look at the audience and you go, they're digital natives. So where should you go to get this made? And I'll give the example of, if you do an audience analysis and it looks like your audience are 18 to 25-year-olds, then you're not really going to go to the ABC. You'd be better off going and looking at a platform in which those audience members frequent. And so for some producers I've worked with, they had this idea and they had it all fleshed out and they were going to go to a network. But then at the end of the process, they're like, actually, we should make this for YouTube because it would perform better on YouTube. And I think a lot of producers are really looking at YouTube more now because it's global. You don't have to worry about making it in Australia and then trying to sell it. You've got this global audience at your fingertips. Essentially, it acts as like a North Star for you to be able to go to funding bodies or to be able to pitch your work with a bit more confidence of going, yes, I know that there's an audience and these are the statistics that prove there's an audience there.
One of the big challenges for producers with YouTube is still how to make the money work, I think. And that comes to the work that you and I have both done on the freestyle TV model and how we can make great stories but bring costs down so the point of profit is lower, and how new media is used in that way. When you get to bringing the show to audience, your belief is that needs to start really early, right, in production. Can you talk us through that process from green light and building an audience through there and how to do it in this new era?
It really pays to have a strategy for your series or film in pre-production. And the benefit of that is you know exactly what you need to capture to be able to sell it at the end. And so what I'm seeing a lot of, particularly in Australia, is we do our standard EPK, which is a waste of time and money. It doesn't cut through. It's very industry facing. It's very boring. We're seeing a lot of Australian series will do maybe a 1-day shoot at the end. They'll get a studio, they'll get their talent in, and they'll try and shoot as much as they can. It's so obvious to an audience that they're in the same costume, they're in the same location. Not only is it obvious, it creates highly skippable content, because once you've seen something once, you don't want to see it again. And so you've got 2.5 seconds to stop people from doing this. So what's really important is to take the audience on the journey with you. And we need to stop being afraid of save everything up. Don't tell anyone we're doing anything until 2 weeks before we want to promote it. No, take them with you. Guys, it's shoot day 1. Here we are with so-and-so. This is this. Take them around. If you're shooting something really exciting, and you've got to remember, people now have a discovery mindset. So they might want to know, how did you flip that car in that scene? That's so interesting for them. And that's why we're seeing a lot of industries are doing, it's so boring, they're doing packing videos where it's just them packing, because people are really interested in seeing, well, how do you work? How does that work? And this is what I constantly say to my TV clients. I have a lot of clients that work in government, in industries that are so boring. No offense. They're so boring. And trying to come up with content ideas is really hard, because how do you make something boring look exciting? Meanwhile, in film and television, people think what we do is so cool. And it is. It's fun and it's unique. And so there's so much content you can capture. One of the frequently asked questions is, we don't have time to shoot content. So my advice to producers is, it's better to shoot little bits of content as you go than doing one big content day at the end, because then you've got that diversity of content. And my biggest advice actually is, the reason you need someone that can work specifically in film and television for a digital strategy is because I can look at a schedule and I can find the slots, because I know production, of when I can get a cast member. And you've got to think like an AD, and you need to think of digital strategy that it's as important as any other department. To go, right, we're doing a set change here. So I could grab so-and-so, because they're just going to be sitting in the green room, and I can take them and do a 5-minute interview. And you need to liaise with the cast to be like, hey, this is what we want to capture. We were thinking of doing it here and here. Does that suit you? So you're not dragging talent all over the place. You could get them in the makeup chair. You could get them walking from the green room to set. So I think it's really important to get the right person in to capture your content. There's a lot of people that can do social media management, but if they don't understand how a production works, and we've all been there, we've all had the promo department come onto set, and all hell breaks loose because they don't understand how production works. It needs to be a department like any other, and you need to value it like any other department as well.
It's such a great point, Nat, because it is one of the things. I've produced over 70 hours of Australian television, and it's such a big job. Like, it's so tough, and the last thing you want to do is for anything to slow you down. And up until this point, that collection of digital assets has been seen as that. So it really is a mind shift and to seeing the value in it. And I love what you say about, it is a department as important as any other department. Let's talk along those lines about the community manager role, because that is part of what makes it an actual department on set.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, this role, a lot of people ask me, what does it mean? It's really having a designated person that can, to some extent, control the success of the series. So much of the success of a film or a series is just out of our hands, and you deliver it and you go, I hope it does well. We can't do that anymore. We need to take that control. So it's having someone that is there from the beginning, who can look at a script, who can read a script and read a schedule and go, this is what we're going to capture. That is not only going to build the community you want, it's not only going to cut through and build awareness, but it's going to point the audience to where it counts the most. And it's going to get them from here on TikTok on their couch to streaming or turning the TV on. That's the ultimate goal. You've got to have the right content along the way to do that. And then at launch, it's someone who can come in and take control of your digital channels to make sure that everything is streamlined, everything is adhering to the strategy, essentially. And again, I've said it before, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's at least a 90-day window to be able to really adequately build an audience. And so that's why the community manager role is really important.
And it's a role that, as you say, comes on maybe even in development, but really early in the production and is all the way through to that marketing stage. So it's a long role over the lifetime of a project. You wrote an article recently about the importance of creators in promoting their own work, and that's an opportunity that we're missing.
I've seen a lot of TikTok action for Australian series so far this year, which is brilliant. Because for so long, I was like, why isn't anyone on TikTok? But it really did make me wonder. Some of the clips that are being clipped up, I was like, that's an odd choice. It's a very weird choice. And there is always a little bit of communication breakdown when it comes to producers and promo and marketing teams. I wrote in my articles, it may not be true, but we've lived and breathed a series for years, months. We have immersed ourselves into the world. We have critiqued every second, every frame. And then the marketing team probably watch it on double speed once. And their job is to sell the heart and the soul that you've put into that series. They can't do it. What you want to do is you want to sit down with the marketing and promos team and you want to say, hey, we'll help you sell this because we know this series so well. We have designed this series specifically to appeal to XYZ. And it has to be a collaboration because without the creators and without hearing from the writer, without hearing from the director or the actors, where they can just spill everything that they've put into this series. And how many times have you made a show and you just want to go, watch our show, it's so good. And I'm texting all my friends going, you have to watch this. It's going to be so good. Everyone watch it. We can actually do that now on social media.
You take that passion and go public.
Yes, absolutely.
You're not texting your friends, you publicly love it. Who are some people that are doing this well? Who's getting this right at the moment? And what can we learn from that?
I'm going to give you a few examples within the industry, but I'm also going to talk about our other sectors because I think we can learn a lot from other businesses. Overseas, Bridgerton absolutely nailed their digital content. They were on set almost every day. They were there day one. They were there at the read in pre-production. Really important. Wicked. I've spoken about Wicked a lot, but I cannot fault the commitment to digital content, not only from the actors, but the director as well. They would have all agreed and been on board and understand the value. Because you can imagine directing Wicked. You've got hundreds of extras. You've got talent. You're live recording singing and you've got a digital person in your face for an interview. And it's great. Today we're doing this. And that's what it takes. It needs everyone to play the game, essentially. But ultimately, it benefits everyone. Those series are doing well. And a lot of people are like, oh, they've got big budgets. But if you've got an iPhone and you have an internet connection, you can make content. You just need to be on set. You need to be on set and you need a strategy. That's all you need. I've developed digital strategies with a lot of content for 10K. So if you've got a line item in your budget for 10K, you've got a really good shot at having a great, authentic digital rollout at launch.
That is not much in a multi-million-dollar budget. That is
No.
incredible value.
Exactly. And for a lot of productions, they may not have the funds, but what's really important is they'll get me to do a strategy, and then they might have people on the crew that have ambitions to one day be a director or be a camera operator. And so I'll train those people on how to capture the content, and then they'll go and capture the content. And then I can come in at the back end.
Trailers. What's changing about trailers?
You can no longer just have one trailer. And I'll tell you why. Not only do algorithms not show you the same content more than once, but people don't typically want to watch the same video more than once. So once they've seen your trailer once, they're just going to skip past it again. And particularly with ads, with TikTok ads and on Instagram, if you're constantly being fed the same trailer, it's not cutting through. You've seen it, you're ignoring it. However, what does work is creating different trailers, not only for your audience buckets, because if you've done your audience analysis, you will know that you don't just have one audience. You have a range of different audience members that you want to make a trailer targeting them specifically. Then you want a variety of content instead of just trailers to be able to build awareness and to entice people to watch the series or film. We saw earlier in the year so many American films. They were making so many cool different trailers, and some of them were 9 seconds of just using the conventions of the platform, which is really important. If you're on TikTok, you need to use TikTok conventions. And often the standard movie trailer, which is epic in the cinema, it's not going to cut through on TikTok because it's not the right convention. So really thinking again about your audience. What are they going to enjoy? How can you build awareness? But how can you ultimately get them to go and see your film or switch over to watch your series?
So we've known for a long time that Netflix, one of the ways that they appeal to different audiences is using different key art, and you're saying that needs to be replicated in your trailers and in also your social assets.
Yeah, absolutely. I think trailers is almost now a term that I don't know if that we'll still have trailers in a couple of years' time. I think it's all just going to be content. Like it's all content because, again, of the way the algorithms work. You're not going to be fed a trailer. Like back in the day, you'd probably see on TV, because you were forced to watch ads, you'd see the trailers over and over again. But now, if you spend most of your budget on making one trailer, your audience are going to see it once and then that's it.
What's the most important urgent message you have for the film and television industry right now in terms of learnings?
It's a digital era, so you must have digital channels and you have to have a digital presence. That's probably the biggest point I need to get across, because we need to be where our audiences are first and foremost. And we need to be controlling what we can control, because right now we're not doing that. We're the first to put our hand up for help. We're an industry that has survived because of government funding, yet we're not working nearly as hard as other sectors are. We're not competing for audiences. We're not even trying. We're not out there building awareness. We're not out there building communities. We're not out there promoting our work. We're not doing not even half of what other industries are doing. And I did say earlier that I would point to a few sectors that are doing really well on their digital strategy. And I think first and foremost, sport they've moved into entertainment, and they're far more entertaining than we are right now. And I use the example of the Australian Open. They had Australian Open TV on YouTube and it was on point. That's where I went to watch the tennis this year, and they really showed Channel 9 up. They really did. And if I were a network covering the tennis in the future, I'd be very nervous because YouTube will, I think, eventually be the preferred platform for sport. And not only did they have a brilliant YouTube strategy, there was also a film, Ball Kids, that was released at the same time. So again, sport moving into entertainment, they're making films, they're making content. And the Australian Open's TikTok strategy was perfection. They tapped into trends, they were funny, they tapped into people having a discovery mindset. They were behind the guy who engraves the winner's name on the trophy. Soon as the game ends, they're like, and this is Barry, and Barry's going to not make any spelling mistakes while he engraves the name. So it's so interesting, and it was live, it was exciting, and they worked really hard at building that audience. And so I think if you're looking for a model, the Australian Open are doing it really well. The other sport is AFL. And if the AFL people can be entertaining and can have great social strategies, so can we. So when you look at the AFL, every single club, they're not extremely wealthy clubs, some of them, but they see the value in community and they see the value in awareness. So they have social media departments and they have their own social media pages, every club. Now, from what I can see, the AFL have seen the benefit in this because when the clubs do well financially, the AFL do well financially. And so the clubs are not being heavily reliant on the AFL for funding because they have been given the right to do their own brand partnerships. So this is key for our industry. If the networks allowed us to have the right to brand our content so we can make money, everyone is better off. The networks are better off. And that whole AFL relationship, I think, is a really good example of what we need to do.
And you've been talking about that ability to monetize our content in new ways through your share of voice idea.
Absolutely. So if you're a production company and you're going into production and you're at commissioning stage and you're negotiating, you have to be negotiating your share of voice. You need to have the rights to your digital and marketing strategy. You need that content. So then you can monetize it. So not only does it help build awareness and it gives you the opportunity to connect with an audience, but you can monetize it and you can make money. And so that is, I think, probably that's what I'm pushing this year. I'm really pushing production companies to be looking at other revenue streams. How can you bring in additional revenue streams? How can you create content, bespoke content, and have it branded, but it also acts as a marketing campaign? I imagine this world where your brand integration pays for your marketing campaign and development. That is the dream, and that's where we need to be looking.
I always love talking to you and so many interesting forward-thinking ideas, and it's really brilliant to have you bringing these to our attention.
I find it hilarious that most of our production companies are not on TikTok, but I tell you who are on TikTok. The nursing homes. So if you want a good, feel-good moment, go onto TikTok and look up St. Paul's Living. They are a very successful TikTok page where the residents do lip syncing, they jump on trends, and I was looking at it and I thought, wow, here we are, the Australian entertainment industry, and we've been beaten by the nursing homes when it comes to TikTok.
To finish up, if you could pitch one big idea right now and get it done, what would that be?
If I could pitch one big idea, what I would love and what I really want to see is the industry come together to help promote our wonderful content. I want to have a YouTube page and a TikTok page designed specifically to sit down with our Australian talents as a platform for the world, but particularly Australian audiences, to remind them of why they love Australian content.
I really love this big idea that you've got, Nat. I've been talking a lot about the need for us to collectively brand as Australia and the power in that. And a lot of the platforms that we used to have that for, such as TV Week, are just not being utilised. They're not as central. And so it's really a deficit that we've got. And when I look at the Bluey example, one of the things that I think is we should all be benefiting from that. But even though that show is exceptional and doing so brilliantly globally, it's not actually lifting the rising tide of Australian storytellers. And that's because we don't have exactly what you're saying. We don't have this collective way of promoting our industry.
Yes, so let's make that happen this year.
Love it, Nat. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Julie.
We Interrupt This broadcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation and the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and first storytellers of these regions. Always was, always will be.
This episode was brought to you by Screen Vixens, Expanding Media and Crew HQ. We Interrupt This broadcast is hosted by Julie Eckersley and Kirsty Stark and produced and edited by Leonie Marsh.